Welcome back. You're still watching Tonight, and it's time for a data point here reflecting on the actions of Parliament this week. That is the National Assembly, which was able to pass an Amendment Bill 2025. This is Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2025, and in that bill, they're proposing three funds. The first one is the National Government Constituency Fund. You realize it misses the D because currently what you know is of NG-CDF. They're also instituting the Senate Oversight Fund. This is a new fund that the senators will be using to oversight various functions. National Government Affirmative Action Fund, also what has been currently implemented under the women representatives. And now, that's what I'm describing, the Senate Oversight Fund. They are hoping that it will be used to empower and resource the Senate to oversight the counties. The other fund is the NGAAF that I just mentioned, currently being under the women representatives. It is meant to enhance measures of the national government on affirmative action, and currently, again, under the women representatives in the constituencies or in the counties, usually used on different functions, including bursaries for learners that are needy. Now, the NGCF, this is the National Government Constituency Fund, will be constituency-based for national government functions, and the allocation from the national will be coming from the national government allocation or share of revenue. Currently, the NG-CDF law provides for 2.5% of that kitty, that is the share of revenue of the national government, and Parliament is meant, after the passage of this constitutional amendment bill, Parliament will come back to enact a legislation to enact this particular provision in the Constitution, should it be okayed by the Senate. Now, at the moment, for the financial year 2025-2026, the NG-CDF kitty has been allocated 58.8 billion shillings, which is money that will be used on the constituencies between this month and June 2026. For the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, it has been allocated 4 billion shillings in the budget of 2025-2026. Now, there is a process that has been taken. You may recall that in December 2022, as soon as President William Ruto took over power back in September, he wrote to the National Assembly and the Senate, both speakers of the two houses, telling them that he thinks there are certain issues that need to be addressed. One of them was to implement the two-third gender rule. He was proposing that there should be a law brought on board to implement this. So far, we have not seen any much progress on that request. Then he also wrote and said that there are funds that should be enacted in the Constitution: the National Government Constituency Development Fund, the Senate Oversight Fund, and the National Government Affirmative Action Fund. Now you can see that since December 2022, Parliament, in this case the National Assembly, has come to heed that request from the President. The other request from the President was the creation of opposition, of the leader of official opposition. This is still pending, but you recall there was the National Dialogue Committee report, the radical report that spoke about such a position. Then there was supposed to be parliamentary oversight of the executive. This has been happening because you will reckon that so far the members of the cabinet secretaries have been appearing before the two houses, addressing plenary sittings to respond to questions of the members of Parliament, whether it's the Senate or the National Assembly. Now, there's a process that must be followed in amending the Constitution. You recall there are two clauses, or two procedures that can be used, either a parliamentary initiative or a popular initiative. Now, the National Assembly has chosen the parliamentary initiative, which is provided for in Article 255 and 256, and particularly for such a bill to go through, the National Assembly must pass it in the second and third reading stages. In both, they have to get at least two-thirds majority, which would be 233 members of Parliament. In this particular case, the second reading stage had 304 MPs voting in support. In the third reading stage, there were 298 MPs voting in support. But after that, the bill has to be taken to the Senate. The Senate, once it receives that bill and tables it, they cannot debate or even go to the second reading stage until 90 days have elapsed. This is about 3 months. Then after that, two-thirds of the Senate must approve this particular bill for it to be considered a constitutional amendment bill that has gone through. Two-thirds would get you to 46 senators. Of course, we know that there is a vacancy after the passing of the Senator of Baringo. Now, continuing with the process, if Senate approves that particular amendment bill, the speakers of both houses will submit the bill to the president for assent and publication. And should that happen, then they must also issue a certificate of passage of the bill saying that it has been passed in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, particularly in Articles 255 to 256 of the Constitution. Beyond that, the president, once receives the bill, in this case, the Constitutional Amendment Bill to entrench the three funds that I just mentioned, the president must consider if that bill touches on provisions of Article 255, sub-Article 1 of the Constitution, that would then mean a referendum would be needed. That's a decision that has to be taken at that point. And if a referendum is needed, then you have to involve the IBC. But if the referendum is not needed, then the president will just have to assent to the bill and publish it, becoming part of the Constitution of Kenya. That's how the process looks like. But there's something to reflect on. This is Article 89 of the Constitution. There shall be 290 constituencies for the purposes of the election of the members of the National Assembly, provided for in Article 97, sub-Article 1A. So this is important because it then recognizes, and the High Court also agrees, that constituencies are not units of service delivery. They are instead units of election, particularly for the election of Member of Parliament. Let's take a look at what else has happened, because the High Court has already expressed itself. And in September 2024, they said that by creating a fund that is administered by the constituency, which is a unit of political representation for legislative and oversight roles, however far removed, the member of the National Assembly may be in the management and administration of the fund and runs afoul the doctrine of separation of powers. So the High Court has already expressed themselves on coming up with a fund that is managed at the constituency level, because again, the Constitution talks about devolution of power. So there are two structures of governance: the national government and the devolved units, which is the county government. For you to introduce another layer of financing or service provision at the constituency, then it runs afoul the Constitution. And obviously, we'll be waiting to see what happens. Will the Senate agree with the members of the National Assembly, or will someone go to court to stop that constitutional amendment? And can a constitutional amendment be unconstitutional? Yes, we know that can be because of the BBI process. But in this particular case, we'll wait to see what the Senate and the courts will have to say about that. We are taking a short break, but that's data point for this week. When we come back, we have more news on the business front. Here's what's coming up.